Not present. Acting Chair Bradley. Commissioner Fowler. Commissioner Garmendia. You said she's online. Commissioner Garmendia. Try one more time. Christina? Okay, we'll keep going. Commissioner Hubman?
Present.
Commissioner Davis?
Present.
Commissioner Miller?
Present.
Commissioner Williams? Not present. Okay. Commissioner Boaz?
Present.
And Commissioner Banton, not present. And you have a quorum.
Thank you. We have a quorum. This time we will turn our attention to the meeting minutes from our last meeting on June 10th, both open and closed session. I'll give you a minute to review those if you haven't already. They were distributed with the packet. This time I'll ask for a motion, please.
I move to approve the minutes from the June 10th meeting, both closed session and open session.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. Can you call the roll, please?
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Chair Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler.
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia.
Aye.
Commissioner Hubman.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Miller.
Aye.
Chair Boaz or Commissioner Boaz.
Aye.
And the motion passes with all present voting aye.
Okay, thank you. So tonight we have 3 items on our agenda, and one of those is an action item. The first item, first two items are informational updates on exciting projects and initiatives. The third item is a review of the data center zoning regulations as amended by the HUD's committee. Also, just want to make the note that there is no public hearing tonight, so we get that out in the open up front. The next item on our agenda is an update on the BRT and LPA. Presentation will be made by Scott Ogilvy.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Scott Ogilvy. Here.
And I'll be talking about updates to the Green Line Bus Rapid Transit project and the adoption of the locally preferred alternative, which is a fancy word for the route, by East West Gateway last month. This is just an informational item to kind of prime the pump for some future actions that will be before the Planning Commission. Many of you on the commission will know this story very well, but for the benefit of the public, we'll go through a little bit of it. So as you know, the region has been seeking north-south, high-capacity, high-quality transit expansion for quite some time. It has always been part of the vision for public transit within the region. As the Metrolink system has been built out, the region has built the first 2 lines, and the third line has always, or maybe not always, but at least for the last 2 decades, has been envisioned to be a north-south line. That line has gone through a number of stages, and East West Gateway has adopted various routes for that project over the years, most notably in 2018, 2024, and last month in June 2026. The prior LPA was a 5.6-mile light rail line, primarily using Jefferson and Parnell, from South St. Louis, staying on Jefferson, and integrating with Metrolink at a to-be-built new station, and then continuing north to Grand and Natural Bridge. After East West Gateway adopted that route in 2024, there was really significant investment in the design and engineering of that project, taking that project much further than any conceptual analysis had been done on routes in the past. And I'll say that every effort was made within reason to make that project a reality as it's depicted on the map there. And a lot was learned in that design and engineering process. A lot of things like, costs were greatly refined compared to previous estimates. And what we learned by the end of the close to 30% design process was that the project was going to cost significantly more than previous estimates for the project. For the 5.6 miles, which was shorter than originally envisioned, the estimate was at least $1.1 billion, which was going to exceed the city of St. Louis fiscal capacity to build that project, even if the project was receiving a substantial amount of funding through the Federal Transit Administration. And really, two things kind of happened at the same time. One, that 30% design was wrapping up, and we had that cost estimate. And the second thing was a federal administration that everybody knew was going to be a little less favorable to transit. And so it was going to be a little bit harder to get funding through the FTA for this type of project. So rather than giving up, the city of St. Louis, Bi-State, and the project team very quickly pivoted to look at other ways to provide that same type of north-south service. In this case, doing a really, or beginning to investigate bus rapid transit. The goal to provide a similar level of service that was envisioned for light rail, but because of the lower per mile cost of bus rapid transit, it was possible to look at extending the last LPA to cover more geography within the city of St. Louis. So, big picture, this is the same route overall from a regional perspective, but because it was desirable to connect to Metrolink at an existing station, in this case at the Civic Center station, just across the street from where we are here, we knew we were going to look at a different route. So instead of staying on Jefferson, the project was going to go into downtown, connect at Civic Center, and then the project team basically looked at several different route options to go north from Civic Center back to Natural Bridge. You can see the 5 permutations on that map. I'll also say the project simultaneously looked at a much further extension along Natural Bridge, essentially to the edge of the city at Goodfellow, and a shorter extension south using Broadway to get to Merrimack Street. Technical analysis got this down to 2 routes, which then went out to the public for public feedback on the 2 potential routes, and a much deeper dive of analysis related to feasibility, land use around these routes, population around these routes, affordable housing, and just a whole host of other factors pertinent to transit and pertinent to the FTA scoring of the project were used to select from one of these 2 routes. So the 2 routes were essentially Olive and Jefferson up to Natural Bridge and Grand, or Tucker and North Florissant to Palm, and then Natural Bridge and Grand. And then the south extension and the north extension are the same in both options. When these 2 routes were looked at side by side, either one of them would have been feasible. The North Florissant route on a number of criteria scored a little bit better, particularly around current transit ridership on that route and access to affordable housing units on the route, which is a driver of ridership. In addition, if the route is on North Florissant, that's a big opportunity to upgrade a street which today has a whole host of very significant infrastructure deficiencies and a very poor safety record. So that was an additional factor. Additionally, public engagement, the North Florissant route was preferred by a solid majority of residents in the corridor who participated in the public engagement. So this is the route that was recommended to East West Gateway. And last month on June 24th, East West Gateway Board of Directors adopted this route. So this is the new north-south official East West Gateway preferred route. This supersedes the last light rail route, which was adopted in 2024. And this route is roughly 11.5 miles. There's 23 station areas identified. And I think very importantly, the scope of this project returns the project to something that is much closer to the original regional vision compared to the most recent light rail route, which was very much just in the city and was going to have some political hurdles to cross to ever be expanded into St. Louis County, which was really the original vision for the high capacity transit system. So just a little bit of project information. It is true that different things, well, a little bit different things are sometimes called bus rapid transit in different parts of the country. And each project has its own details and nuances. So we want to really distinguish what makes bus rapid transit different from typical bus service. And it's a whole suite of features that add up to a good rider experience that is efficient, moves people quickly and consistently, and delivers a light rail-like level of service. And so these features are a station-based service. So these are not bus stops. People are not getting on and off the bus at any point. The bus is only stopping at stations. The stations are basically the same design as the light rail stations would have been. These are in the roadway, in the median stations. They have canopies. They have off-board fare payment, so you're paying before you enter the bus. They have level boarding, so that's roll-on, roll-off service, which is important not just for people using wheelchairs, but anybody pushing a stroller or with mobility limitations. It's just easier to get on and off the bus, not going up and down the stairs. The vast majority of this project will have a dedicated guideway. Also, that's a jargony transit term for bus lanes. In most cases, these bus lanes will be protected by curbs, center running, so very much like the guideway for light rail would have been. Although there's a little more flexibility with BRT in that the bus lanes can be used for ambulances, emergency services, police. It's easier to make left turns across them compared to light rail. Other features like transit signal priority. So that is where the bus can communicate with the traffic signal. So if it's approaching a traffic signal and the signal is about to turn red, it can hold the signal for a few seconds at green to continue through the intersection, which just speeds up service and makes it more efficient. And then it'll have frequent service, so it'll have the same service frequency as light rail in St. Louis, which is generally 10 to 20 minutes, depending on time of day. So this project, 11.5 miles, 23 stations. Current estimated annual ridership is around 1.3 million people, or 1.3 million riders. There's about 60,000 residents within a half mile of the station areas identified. And I will emphasize that this is a very preliminary capital cost estimate, but we're in the neighborhood of $360 to $590 million. So that is, twice the length of project, twice the stations for something like 1/3 to 50% of the cost, roughly. A little bit of national context or context for this project within the FTA. So this project has been part of the FTA's CIG program, stands for Capital Investment Grant Program. This is the primary way the federal government funds capital for transit expansions. It's been in the first phase of that process, which is called project development, for 2 years now. Last month, the project received a 1-year extension. Project team has been in constant contact with the FTA as this transition has happened, talking through the changes and the new assessment that's being made. The FTA for all intents and purposes, still views this as the same project as the light rail project. Obviously now with a different mode. So the goal of the project in the next 12 months is to get to that 30% design, to go through the environmental process, and to be ready in 12 months for the next phase of the capital investment grant process, which is called entry into engineering, which is where you go from that preliminary 30% engineering all the way to full engineering of the project. And there are 1,001 details involved in all of that to access funding from the FTA. The national picture, roughly 2/3 of projects across the country that are seeking funding from the FTA are now bus rapid transit projects. That's a big change from a decade ago when there were a lot more light rail projects on the menu. Significant shift is really driven by the huge escalation in costs associated with light rail. It is also a little bit driven by the fact that, the country has built over 1,000 miles of light rail projects since the early 1980s. So a lot of the easier, higher productive routes around the country have been built. And just like in St. Louis, you get to your third or your fourth or your fifth, major transit route within a region. And sometimes it makes sense not to use light rail either for technical reasons or for estimated ridership reasons. Another silver lining to bus rapid transit is that the projects tend to move through the FTA process much faster because they are lower cost. They do not eat up as much of the total funding available through the FTA in any one year. They generally have much simpler environmental clearances because there's just less involved in the construction of them. And so from start to finish, these are still really big, substantial capital projects, but they go faster than light rail projects tend to. So local implications, particularly for the Planning Commission and for our office. There are, of course, as everyone here knows, there are a number of existing adopted plans that reference the 2024 light rail LPA. This includes Transportation Mobility Plan, the Strategic Land Use Plan, the Project Connect Neighborhood Plan, which is nearing completion. It shows up in other existing and in-process neighborhood plans. So there will be a number of updates that will have to happen that we will bring to the Planning Commission as those updates are completed, and there'll be amendments to these adopted plans. And so you'll look for those over, I don't want to put a date on it, and they probably won't all happen at once, but look for those in future meetings. Happy to take questions. Also here with me is Jessica Gershman. You know and love her from her time at her decade at Bi-State. Just recently, she actually moved to HNTB, which is heading up the project team for this project. So she is still actually working on this project, but from a different office building. Yes, same office building, different floor in the same office building. So she's available for any questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So I think we'll go in order, and we'll start with the people online for questions. So Commissioner Boaz?
No questions. It seems like a good solution, and I guess we've got a lot of work ahead of us to make some adjustments. Thanks so much.
Commissioner Garmendia?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Saunier?
No, my Commissioner. I first just want to commend the city on making the pivot. I am still someone who's a little heartbroken that, can't do light rail. I am so envious when I go to other cities and see just robust light rail systems. But I also understand the need to pivot, especially in the particular political climate that we're in now. And I think the only question I have is something that I know you mentioned that a lot of the initial work that was put into light rail was put into this work. Could you talk a little bit about if we do light rail, that perhaps how that impacts our ability, if we do bus rapid transit, how that impacts our ability to do light rail before. Like if we're able to implement bus rapid transit, which I know we're a ways from, but the ways for folks in the public who were really excited about light rail, that maybe later on, should we be in a position where it's more feasible, especially financially and funding wise, that they could still be a complement to each other.
Yeah. So I do want to emphasize that a project like this is a major capital project. It'll be hundreds of millions of dollars. So I don't want to convey that you do this project and then a few years down the road, you can build light rail on top of that project, because that's probably not realistic. In kind of the longer time frame, probably outside of my career, it certainly wouldn't prevent it in the in a more distant future. That space is essentially there, available for any type of transit if it was determined in the future that investment it made sense to do that investment in light rail. But I think as we talk to residents, for me at least, really we're emphasizing like the quality and permanence of this product. There is some potential for confusion about what bus rapid transit is, because there are just bus improvement projects that happen out there where, Boston and Chicago do a lot of this. They just put a bus lane in, it helps speed up service somewhere, but it's not really a huge capital project that's like a permanent investment. It's more of a, working kind of around the margins to improve service on a route. Here, we're going to be rebuilding streets, building stations, it's going to be a very visible, permanent type of investment. And I don't want to convey to people that, we do this in a few years and then.
I just want to make sure we convey that us going this direction doesn't mean that any other direction is fully ruled out. Or, I've heard some misinformation from some members of the public who feel like, oh, well, if we do bus rapid transit, then we've completely lost our opportunity to even pursue, light rail. I don't want to imply that they will follow behind each other, because who knows like what will happen. But I just wanted to put it on record for folks that, pivoting in this direction is taking advantage of the opportunity for funding that is in front of us, and it doesn't eliminate the possibility of any other options in the future.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yes.
And do you have any, I know you spoke a little bit in your presentation about a timeline or next steps for this?
Yeah, so there's almost too many next steps to sort of list here. The project team is fully engaged, moving very quickly on going from this route and conceptual design into preliminary engineering, with the goal in the next 12 months of nailing down really exactly what the project looks like, much closer estimate of what the project costs, and doing the kind of boring financial things to make the project eligible according to FTA's criteria for funding, and then getting to that next step with the FTA, which is called entry into engineering, where we just continue that work from 30% up to 100% design. We're designing, 12 miles of roadway, 23 stations, new traffic signals, bus procurement, operations plans. There's really a lot of stuff that goes into the planning and engineering of this, clearing all the federal environmental regulations, which obviously the project has a beneficial environmental impact, but you have to document all of its potential impacts through the corridors. So all that is underway. And the goal is to keep the project moving, but also to be engaging with residents about bus rapid transit over the next year, because since we don't have a bus rapid transit corridor in the St. Louis region right now, there's not complete knowledge of what these projects look like locally. I think it's ramping up as time goes on, but there's a lot more education and discussion to be done, I think.
This is my final question. It might be one better for Ms. Gershman. The last time we discussed this, we had a lot of conversation at the Board of Aldermen about whether or not pivot in this direction required a vote. I would love to know an update on any of those conversations or where we may believe we are with that.
Yeah, so I won't get into whether it is required or not, but my understanding is that there will be a bill that would put Proposition 1. Let me back up a little bit. Certainly, we don't need a vote to assess bus rapid transit, right? We are fully the city and bi-state can be looking to the future, making plans and doing assessments of different types of transit and have done so in the past. The question is about the funding to build the project. And so without getting into whether it's required or not, my understanding is that an alderperson will introduce a bill to put it back on the ballot to change, I'll say change the terms of the Prop 1 language and expand in a more explicit way what the eligible uses are so that voters would essentially have a chance to say yes or no. I want to say this in a nice way, but it would be awkward if voters said no, because then we wouldn't have light rail and we also wouldn't have bus rapid transit.
Right. I think that was nice.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering my questions. And again, thank you all for your work on the project.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you for the presentation. It's always really just interesting to hear about this. And I got to participate in some of the public meetings and the route selection and all of that. And that was just a really cool process to participate in. Alderman Saunier asked my question about the vote and when it might happen. I think that you'll have a lot of people who are ready to help spread the message about why this pivot is important and why we need to do this. So I hope we can count on voters to support this. I think it's a very compelling case. And I know something people have been talking about for a long time, and now finally that pivot has been kind of made. So appreciate the presentation and all the time you take to answer questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Hubman.
Yeah, thanks. I do have a couple of questions. One is, bi-state just opened up their first secure platforms, or it was in the media and whatnot. Is this fall within that context? Is the intent to use that secure platform structure on, in the middle of Jefferson and Jefferson Road with the BRT stations and what that might look like and how it might work?
Yeah. So those questions, the project is getting to the phase where it will be engaged with those questions. Obviously, it's a very different context. So you can fully enclose a light rail station, most of the stations on the current route, in a way that is pretty distinct from how you would try to do that in the middle of a street. So I think the design approach to achieving like a high level of safety and rider comfort is probably going to be a little bit different from how the SPP plan has worked. But because the project is just getting into the start of that design, there's not too much to say about it other than as the project gets into station design, that'll be, I think, a significant element of public engagement to talk to residents and riders about, how they interact with the station, what it looks like, all of those factors.
Okay. I would hope there's a way to, if you want to keep the light rail at that transfer station, you can still maintain this level of security for the light rail. And I see some serious trade-offs with the quality and the impact on the neighborhoods at the station areas if we're taking that approach.
Yeah. So at the transfer station, because we've, started looking at that, I can say that a rider who was switching modes, like switching from bus rapid transit to light rail, they're going to have to go through the gate, the Metrolink fare gate. So I can say that much at least, just because like the BRT platform is going to be, far enough away that you have to get off the bus and walk through the fare gate to Metrolink.
Thanks. Another question. You mentioned TOD. It's a new alignment. It's a different technology. Is there any intent to kind of study the TOD potential or monitor or even facilitate somehow or incentivize TOD along the corridor for the BRT alignment?
Those are good questions. I think there's so many of us here who would answer those in slightly, we would maybe emphasize different things, I guess. I mean, the first thing I would note is that, the whole ZOOP process is making the entire city more transit supportive.
Walkable urban.
Yeah. And this, establishing this route gives the ZOOP process time to incorporate it into, the zoning recommendations for particular parcels in throughout the corridor and in station areas.
Yeah.
I think another approach to that question is to look at all of the neighborhood plans that are happening. And in some of those plans, there's recommendations for things like redevelopment areas that might be station oriented or redevelopment plans that could come out of them that might be station oriented. So I think the answer to your question is probably yes, probably in like a number of different lanes that, we'll see how they get emphasized as we move forward.
Okay. I think like the market context is very different in different segments of the corridor. And there's hopefully a way to incentivize in areas that don't really have the market capacity, to do much right away.
Yeah.
Because that gets into an equity issue and all these other things. So,
yeah, so the SLDC incentive scorecard, proximity to the prior light rail alignment was one of the factors to score points.
yeah.
That scorecard's been around for a couple of years right now. I imagine people are thinking about, how it can be adjusted, certainly how it can incorporate this new alignment for, points oriented towards building near stations. So I think that's another,
Okay.
It's an input in the incentive process to guide projects into station areas.
I would encourage staff, and I know this is another ask for a very already tasked staff, but to think of ways to try to manage or incentivize that sort of, appropriate or desired stationary development along the length of the corridor in areas even where it's more challenging to do so.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I still have more questions. So if it gets into trade-offs, as the pencils get sharpened and the design develops and everything, are there clear priorities? BRT is kind of a spectrum, depending on what facility you build and all of that. Would a clear priority be to maintain the full intended length of the alignment, or would it be to maintain kind of gold level standard of service wherever possible? Or do you know yet? I know it's kind of an unfair question, but
no, it's not unfair. I think the intent is that the project team thinks we can do both of those things. And so that's why that alignment that was adopted as the LPA was 11.5 miles and not 7 or 8 or 9 miles. The high level of service has been kind of a guidepost throughout the project, not to build. Nobody has been suggesting, a BRT light project is built. The intent has been to get as close to the performance of the light rail project as possible. And, in the cities and by state's favor is that we have been collecting the Prop 1 tax since 2017.
Yeah.
We have a substantial nest egg down payment, provided that, the FDA continues to operate in a relatively similar fashion as it has been operating over the recent years. There should be enough funding available to do a really top-notch project.
thanks.
Commissioner Williams.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Commissioner Miller.
Yeah, I got a couple, Scott. One is we spend a lot of time on the neighborhood planning process. A lot of this route, especially on the north side, goes through a lot of those areas. this major infrastructure infusion can change those. So are we really thinking about setting up a planning process along the route that gauges economic development and residential impacts so that not just on the nuts and bolts of building it, but what it'll do, I know you mentioned the zoning impacts, but crossing it, it closes off certain traffic patterns and it emphasizes others. And so is there a process that's been outlined for this kind of planning?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple lanes. So I think one of the lanes is incorporating this route into the neighborhood planning process. And I think the most timely one is how it gets wrapped into the Project Connect area because, the timing of these two things landed at roughly the same time, which is, it's sort of an unfortunate coincidence, basically. However, I mean, there has been some conversation along those lines already. And then as the rest of the neighborhood plans get going in places that touch on the route, those questions can be asked through the planning process. And I think that neighborhood planning process can inform the project team about things residents care about and are interested in. There's also the design process of the project itself that will be engaging with residents. Now that the route is determined and roughly station areas are determined, it's much easier, I think, for the project team to get into the things that residents really care about, like some of the things you mentioned. What does the roadway design look like? Or are there closures or changes in access? Where can you cross the bus lanes, the guideway? Where can you not do that? I think all of those things will be on the menu of topics that the project team has to work through with residents. And it is, some of that will start happening this fall as we get into that 30% design phase. But there will be a couple years of engineering. So I think residents can expect to be able to engage with the project over the next couple of years. I think, the next year is really about figuring out the firming up that skeleton of the project, but then, some of the details can certainly still change throughout the design process. That's typical of these big capital projects.
Yeah, so one of the questions I had is about the stations. So you have a lot of them, 23, and where they're located. I mean, if you're only at 30% design, theoretically, then some of them can move or grow or shrink. Is that possible? Or, I mean, 30% design doesn't say you've got the route, but the stations themselves, how big they are.
Right.
I mean, there's ground issues, there's somebody bought something that we didn't know about 2 years ago and they're building something there. Or real, things have happened.
Yes. So just to clarify, the project today is at about like 5% design. We're moving into that 30% design phase over the next year. But the things you bring up are true. So the station locations this list of station locations was decided on making them relatively equally spaced throughout the project corridor. They have to be at a traffic signal because the light has to turn red so people can cross to the station area. And they because they're at locations that have traffic signals, they tend to be where two sort of larger volume streets intersect, just because those are the locations that have signals. But in terms of, could there be some tweaks to that through the process? I think there could be. I think especially as you go down Natural Bridge, where, the last Green Line light rail project wasn't really engaging with that part of the city because the project wasn't there. I think there's more probably potential for some assessment of those through that engagement process. I do want to also say this, the stations are primarily in the right of way. We want to emphasize that there really aren't significant like property purchases or takings that have to happen. It's just something people, rightly have those concerns. So we always like to emphasize that there might be some very marginal right of way adjustments, but no major property acquisitions are really required.
Okay. Last question is about the phasing of construction. What are the thoughts at a high level about construction? The whole line open at once? Does one side open first? Are there any thoughts about that? Or you radiate out?
I haven't heard any suggestion that it wouldn't be built as one project all at once and all open together. The whole thing is phase one. Say it that way.
Commissioner Davis.
No questions, just a quick comment. I appreciate, the pivot out of necessity. I'm definitely a fan of the connectivity to downtown. I think it makes a lot of sense to move it up North Tucker to North Forest and to the Natural Bridge where more residents live, and there's definitely a few commercial corridors up there that I think it could definitely support. So, yeah, I like it. That's it.
Commissioner Fowler.
Going close to the end is great. You guys asked all my questions. One is thanks guys for staff for moving the informational pieces to the top more fresh. I like this a lot better. I'm able to think about this stuff a lot easier. Really heartbroken to see the light rail kind of go away. So I'm happy that the city we're pivoting to recoup anything and keep the plan going. We need more transit in the city, so I'm happy that we're doing something. One kind of not a question, but a request, I guess. I'm not sure, maybe this is already being accounted for, is looking back at the light rail plans and all the feedback and commentary from residents and trying to glean as much information as we can. For the things I think about are the station layouts. I know we tend to want something sterile, but I think one of the big takeaways from that was we want something that looks like it came from that neighborhood. So while it can be the same or similar through all neighborhoods, a station that's on Cherokee won't look like a station that's up on at Natural Bridge. Kind of pull some of those items from the neighborhood, get it feedback for those things so it looks like something that's inviting and people take ownership of, and kind of gets rid of the stigma of like, oh, it's a bus, there's no seats. I don't know, and it probably brings more people in to actually use the system. So just kind of think of some of those things. There's other comments, throughout all those meetings, the group for the Green Line. So please take time and go back and kind of pull some of that information and use that as your starting point for when you have public engagement for this piece, for the BRT. That's all I really have. Thanks, Scott, for your time. Thanks for the presentation.
Thanks, Commissioner.
So I have no formal questions either. Bus rapid transit has been talked about for many, many years. This is an exciting project. Certainly want to thank you, Scott, and the staff, Jessica, everybody involved in the project, because it has taken a lot of work to get it to light rail, understand that, and then move it to this point. So I believe this is going to be a great project, and I'm excited to see it go forward. So with that,
Chairman, if I could just make one comment and add one question.
As you look at the route and this pivot, is remember the population differences in both from the southern route and the northern route, and therefore the opportunities the establishment of this route has, particularly for being incentive for developing in places of opportunity. Certainly, we are going to be very conscious of and future planning efforts about station locations and making them attractive and convenience and helpful to all of this. And then with our sustainability director sitting in front of me, Scott, I'm going to ask you a question. How's it anticipated that these buses would be powered?
Those are the questions we answer in this next phase. Yes. So It could be battery, they could be battery hybrid, they could be diesel. We'll see. What I think that's a question that the transit agency will have strong opinions on.
All right, thank you.
I just would like to add, I've ridden BRT in a number of other cities. It's really nice. So I think this would be a fantastic addition to the city. So
Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks.
Our second informational item tonight will be on the zoning upgrade update, and the presentation will be by Miriam.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Miriam Keller, City Planning Executive for General Planning and Design. I'm just going to provide actually a very quick introduction for then Renee Bieberstein from Code Studio, who's on with us and will provide the more comprehensive presentation. I think the context here is that we've been doing a lot of work. A couple of months ago, probably a little bit more than a couple, put out a first draft of the districts with dimensional standards, use permissions, and as well as a first draft zoning map. So that is kind of the first very significant publication of, again, draft materials. We've received a lot of feedback, and that's part of what's going to be presented tonight is just a quick reminder on those districts, spend some time on the feedback, and then give you a little bit of a preview of the next module of draft material, which is development standards. I think this will be really, and this was deferred from last month's meeting because the data centers item went so late. So glad we're doing this here tonight. I think a sort of meta goal of this presentation is to start to engage commissioners as partners and thinking through the feedback that we're receiving, because you'll see that on a number of issues, we're receiving really divergent feedback. And we will have to kind of through this process together, identify an appropriate path forward to the city. And I think staff in partnership with the commission, that's a really good place for that to happen. And then one more thing before handing it to Renee is to remind commissioners that this is, and the public, that this entire project is a real joint effort of the city's Planning and Urban Design Agency and the zoning section of the Building Division, which has welcomed a new team member in Trey McCarter, longtime kind of in the family at CDA, but he's moved over to the zoning section. And I know that team is really excited. I know PDA is really excited to have him on board for this work and all of the many other things that the zoning team has to do. So welcome, Trey. This is his first planning commission meeting. All right. And then I think Renee is on and ready to go.
Thank you, Miriam. Let me share my screen. Oops. Looks like somebody's going to have to let me share.
Looks like they're working on it.
Okay, thanks. All right. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Give me a thumbs up. Okay, excellent. Okay, so again, I'm Renee Bieberstein, Associate Principal with Code Studio, which is the lead consultant on the Zoop project. I have a fairly long presentation today, but I'm going to try and move really quickly through it so we can get to questions. So feel free to ask me to circle back to any of the slides that I may have gone over quickly. Happy to answer any questions you may have. I'm going to start with a bit of a project update just in terms of where we are on the timeline, what's happening next. Just touch on the draft districts, which I think Miriam has already shared with you guys earlier from back in March. Go over some public feedback that we've heard on those districts, and then introduce the upcoming draft development standards, which are going to be released next week. And then questions and discussion. So where we are on the timeline right now, this is phase one of the project. We are kind of nearing the end of phase one. I'm going to transition to phase two fairly soon. I'll just, to restate here, we started this with a code diagnostic that was a kind of an analysis of the existing code. We came up with some conceptual districts to start a discussion about where we might be going next. Then we came out with an initial set of draft districts, land uses, and zoning map that came out in March. So that's what has collected a bunch of public comments I'll be summarizing for you today. We are now kind of nearing the end of the drafting of the first draft of the development standards that will be released soon. And then the last component of this project, this initial round of work will be the final module, the administration section, which is the decision-making processes. In phase two, which follows that, which this timeline is still tentative, so some of this may change a bit. But we're going to take all those kind of little pieces that we've put out in modules and consolidate them together into one sort of better draft, let's say, a sort of complete first draft that will go to the public and collect more comments, and then we'll put together a revised draft. We also are going to be working on a web interface for the code during that time period. And then hopefully it will be ready to go to you guys and eventually to the Board of Aldermen by late next year. There's also a code manual and policy recommendations report that we'll be working on separately on the side during that time. So all these, these dates here next year some of this may change, but I think just to say that we are, I guess, chronologically kind of in the middle of the project right now, but there's still a substantial amount of work to go. And some of these later pieces are some of the biggest ones. So there's a lot more engagement and involvement that's going to happen. The engagement timeline, I won't go through all this, but this is the phase one engagement. There's also a phase two engagement. So looking at regular public events that are going to happen, there's the next round will be coming up next week. And interactive online commenting, Code Connect webinars. We have an advisory committee again that we meet with regularly, and working groups and regular meetings with roundtables and other stakeholder meetings and other stakeholders. I haven't got meetings with the planning commission here up until the previous to the final review that you guys will do. But no doubt we'll be seeing each other a few more times before that, at least. Just to remind you about some of those upcoming events, next week we have public workshops on the 14th and the 16th, where we released, again, these draft development standards and look for comment from people. There's a Code Connect webinar, which is really just an online version of the same thing that will happen the following week. And then the next public touch points, the exact dates are still TBA, but we're looking at the last week of September / first week of October to come out with this. So this will be the administration component, and then the second draft of the district's uses and map following all the comments that we've collected so far. So that's coming up in the fall. Draft districts. So again, you guys have seen these already. I'm not going to dwell too long on these, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about them later on. Just as a reminder, there was a kind of a pile of the draft districts that we came out with in March and shared these with the public. These are, again, an early draft, and this is subject to change. No doubt we'll change probably a number of these as we go forward. But there was a set of zoning districts. There was a relationship between the land uses and the sloop for each one of these. There was a laid out page that showed some graphics, some diagrams, and some built form standards, as well as a allowed use table for each one of these districts. Still to come, which we're going to be coming out with, I think, for the September touch point, is a little bit more detail on some of the stuff that we didn't get to in March. So that includes full definitions for all the uses. So there was a lot of comments asking for more clarity about what some of these uses meant, and also things like special use standards that would go along with them. There was a zoning map that came out in March as well. So this was put online. We got to sort of test out our interactive online commenting system. So I'll talk to you in a moment about some of the many comments we received on this. This was rough in a number of ways, and there was, a number of things that are going to need correction for the next draft. But I'll just say this is, this map kind of evolved out of looking at the sloop land use map, being informed by the existing zoning, also just kind of working over some of it with staff. So there was a bit of a process to get where we got to, but there's still a lot more to go ahead. The public comment themes, we spent a little bit more time on this section here. So that rough draft of zoning districts, standards, and uses that released on March 25th, we had public comments open until March 31st or May 31st rather. We had to close them eventually because we just needed some time to kind of digest them and work through them with staff before the next round of draft, in which case there'll be, another public comment period after that. We're just going to sort of summarize some of the comments that we received. This is not all of them, but just some of the most common ones. Every one of these comments I'll say is being read by the project team, and we're going to consider them all as we move to the next draft. Just in terms of where the comments were on the map, this is not necessarily where people who commented live, but where the comments were posted on the map. You can see it's pretty broadly across the city, probably more of a concentration in some of the kind of southern, sort of near southern neighborhoods. So top neighborhoods were Tower Grove South, Shaw and the Hill. There's a few neighborhoods that didn't get any comments at all: Cheltenham, Kings Oak, Mark Twain. As we kind of go forward, we need to kind of make a little bit of an effort to try and get more comments on some of those other parts of the city. I do think there's a fair bit of distribution here, but it could be better. We also collected comments on the draft documents. So we posted through a kind of interactive system called Conveo, the draft PDFs, and we had people comment on that as well too. So those were comments that were less geographically specific, but more about just the nature of the zones and the standards. So some of the themes here, just generally on the districts, I would say there's a lot of comments about the lack of a single family exclusive zoning district equivalent to your A district today. There are some people who like that and some people who didn't like that. In the draft, the kind of least intensive district was allowing up to a maximum of 2 residential units plus an ADU. So it's a bit of a step up from what you have now, just in terms of allowed density. So a lot of different opinions about that. There are some concerns about us having this auto-oriented commercial district called CG. Some people didn't like it. There was a lot of need to better understand some of the kind of new zoning districts that were quite unlike your existing ones. So we may need to do a little bit more work in just kind of communicating those. Whether we keep them or not, some of them, again, may change, but we had one called Cottage for sort of tiny houses specifically and manufactured homes, the industrial mixed use district, the agriculture district, the campus district. So just there was a lot of questions about their intents and standards, wanting some more clarity. There was interest potentially in adding some more contextually varied heights in the industrial mixed use district. So maybe having more than one district or having some sort of variation that could better accommodate different contexts where that gets applied on the map. Probably particularly whether it's close to a low-rise neighborhood or not. In terms of the standards, height, coverage, units per lot, being allowed in or around some neighborhoods. There's a lot of concern about fear about allowing too much overbuilding or density that might be inconsistent with existing neighborhoods. But there were some people who liked it and felt like maybe it should even go further than that. So again, there was a variety of opinions here. There were concerns about parking impact associated with allowing more intensification as well. In terms of uses, we introduced the idea of neighborhood mixed use, which is a mostly residential zone that would allow some commercial uses, smaller commercial uses. Some people liked it and maybe felt like it should go further. Other people were concerned about it and thought that it might have a negative impact on the surrounding residential neighborhoods. So you're seeing a theme here. There's a lot of varied comments from the public. Concern about the prohibition of residential uses in CG. So for that commercial, auto-oriented commercial zone, in this draft, we said no residential uses. We might be stepping back from that going forward based on some of the comments that we received. Wanting even more restrictions on certain uses. There's a lot of comments about use in particular and concern about things like gas stations, auto-oriented businesses, drive-throughs, and so forth. We tried to restrict those to certain districts, but there were some people who felt like it should go further. There was some concern about bars and outdoor patios as well, and a lot of concern about enforcement of nuisance issues, which is something we've heard a lot of times before. In terms of mapping, there was a lot of specific comments about where the different neighborhood and neighborhood mixed use districts got mapped. Some people felt like it should be moved over a block or a property, or different ways here and there, or maybe more than that, maybe moved over a whole neighborhood. So not surprising. That's where most of the people in the city live. A lot of people had strong opinions about exactly what neighborhood mixed use district got applied to them. Also some specific adjustments to where mixed use districts were mapped, generally wanting more or less height in different places. There was some observation that the draft zoning didn't match some existing and proposed historic districts and might cause confusion or even incentivize loss of historic buildings. So we're going to have to go back and clean that up a little bit and correct some of that. Some people felt like we were insufficiently aggressive in terms of rezoning industrial areas, that we should go further in terms of rezoning those to non-industrial uses. I think we did a fair bit of that, consistent with the SLUT, but some people thought it should go further. Again, there was some comment there was too much CG and maybe some inconsistency in the logic of where it was mapped. There were some probably errors in open space mapping, or suggestions that there's a suggestion that open spaces should maybe be mapped a little bit more cautiously. And some people also commented there was maybe too much density being given in certain areas that were risk of flooding. So we're gonna have to go back and double check some of these against the flood maps. Probably more than anything else, there was just a lot of interest in wanting more clarity. Some things are going to come out, and I think that's going to provide clarity in the fullness of time by September. So the use definitions, as I said, rolling those out, coming out with a full set of use standards, a full set of rules of interpretation around the standards or metrics, I think will help people understand how some of those are measured. The development standards, which again are being introduced next week, and we'll talk about in a sec. Maybe clarifying a bit about principal and accessory uses in the use table, and just clarifying the timeline and opportunities for further comment. As you've seen, we've put together a tentative phase 2 timeline now. When we initially presented this back in March, we didn't have that. So some people felt a little bit uncertain as to how many more rounds of revision or comment they were going to have a chance to do. The next steps for all this, so I think just continuing to kind of engage intensively with the public and stakeholders through as many different means as possible. It's not only the online comments, it's also the in-person meetings, and it's roundtables and so forth as well with people. There's look for some opportunities to try and better engage some neighborhoods that didn't leave a lot of comments. In terms of the standards and the uses for September, I think we're going to make some adjustments to the palette draft districts to reflect some of those comments. Update the district standards and uses where needed. Clarify the standards by adding the full rules of interpretation, and clarify the uses by adding the use definitions and use standards. We're also going to go back and make updates to the map as well. So it's probably going to be a fairly substantial edit. We're going to adjust some of the locations of the neighborhood mixed use and CG districts in particular, probably amongst others. Okay, I'm just going to move on to the last part here, and then happy to circle back to anything. This is just a bit of like I said, a bit of a kind of overview of the development standards that we're going to come out with next. We're just sort of delivering this draft code in kind of modules, just because it's such a big thing. It's easier to kind of put it out in pieces at a time. This module is going to get into, again, sort of the development standards, which are really in a separate part of the code from the districts. They're basically kind of generally, they apply generally across the city to multiple districts, although they can apply in different ways. They augment the rules established under the zoning districts with more general provisions. And so in this draft, we're going to be touching on pedestrian and bicycle access, bicycle parking, clear pedestrian zone. I'll talk to you in a moment about what these mean. Vehicle access, parking lot dimensions and landscaping, vehicle use areas, transitions and transition screens, frontage screens and site element screens, tree planting, walls and fences, signs and lighting. Another piece of this will be parking standards in terms of actual numeric requirements for parking. We decided to kind of pause on that until we had a little bit more chance to engage with the public and stakeholders before we came out with an initial recommendation on that. So that is pause, but happy to hear comment. We will be soliciting some kind of general comment from folks next week. The applicability of development standards. So these don't necessarily apply to every development. There's a table that comes in here that actually sort of explains when each one of these kicks in. So for new construction, all of them would apply. But they would apply, so only some of them would apply in other cases. So if you're doing an addition of a certain scale, a site modification, change of use, some of them would kick in, but others wouldn't. And I won't go through all this, but there is a definition as to what each one of those different changes means. So going through each one of these, we've just kind of taken a look at the existing code and kind of indicated how this aligns. A lot of these are things that you don't have in your existing code. Again, it's quite a dated code that doesn't have some of this content in it. But part of the conversation we're having here, and we'd like to have with you and maybe the public, is, how do you feel about these? Are these important and badly needed, or are some of them going to go too far and add red tape to the development process? So these are, we're talking about adding new standards into the code. We think these are important, but again, we, the consulting team, are not all local to St. Louis. Some of these may be more important than others, and we may need to tweak some of the numbers and so forth here. So this is, again, sort of a work in progress. Pedestrian and bicycle access is really just about how you get from the sidewalk to the entrance, the principal entrance of the building as a pedestrian. So this is something that doesn't exist in the current code today. We're planning to introduce some standards around, again, having a kind of a safe and clear space to move between the public realm and the entrances to those buildings. Bicycle parking is much like any other kind of parking. You actually do have standards for bicycle parking in your code today. They're a little bit lower than what we might be proposing. It doesn't distinguish between long-term and short-term parking in your current code. So we like to kind of create that distinction. Longer term being, indoor secure parking for, residents or employees. Short-term being usually outdoor parking for visitors or customers. So a set of requirements for this, we applied to all districts, including the central business district in this draft. The clear pedestrian zone, this is kind of an interesting one. Again, this is something that we're kind of testing out in some other places. May need to be changed, but the notion here is that we need to establish some kind of minimum regulations for sidewalks, just to ensure accessibility and use by people. Typically, this is the responsibility of the city. This is things that fall within the public right of way. However, we're suggesting here that if a development happens that substantially increases intensity in some way, and it's going to put more people on the sidewalk, and you have a substandard sidewalk within the right of way, or potentially even no sidewalk, that a certain amount of easement must be provided in the front of that property to allow people to pass by. And so, there might be different standards for like width based on the type of use, the intensity of use. Vehicle access, this is again how you get in and out of sites. It's not really regulated in zoning today, but it is regulated through the city traffic code. So we have some standards about where you can put in curb cuts and how you get in and out of the sites. Parking lot dimensions and landscaping. This is regulated today in your codes. Not really landscaping so much, but parking is. So we have a set of standards around what we're proposing here in terms of minimum dimensions and also landscaping requirements for larger parking lots. Vehicle use areas, this gets into things like stacking for drive-throughs. So this is something that is not regulated in zoning today, although some of it is regulated through traffic. Transitions is a development standard for where you have two very different types of zones that abut each other. So where you have a more intensive one beside a less intensive one. Typically, you think of this as being like a situation where you have something like a situation where you have a commercial mixed use area backing onto a residential neighborhood. So there'd be some sort of transition standard for those two things come up against each other. The components that are usually a setback requirement, some sort of fencing or wall requirement, and some sort of landscaping requirement, and also potentially stepping of building heights for taller districts. So for each one of these different combinations of zones, there's one of these standards would kick in. Transition screens. This is again, between those different uses, so standards for those. Frontage screens, you don't exactly have this in your code, but you do have requirements for fences around certain uses. So, again, sort of screening heavier or more intensive uses from the public realm. There's a few different options for that. Site element screens, this is about screening out things like waste storage, roof-mounted equipment, wall-mounted equipment, and so on. So you don't see those things from the public realm. Tree planting is maybe a more interesting one that cities are talking about more and more. Doesn't really exist in your code today, but is a good way to sort of tackle things like urban heat island effect. So thinking about introducing, or we are going to be introducing a set of draft minimum tree canopy requirements. This would apply only to larger projects, not to an individual house. Walls and fences. This is more about establishing a maximum height for a fence in different contexts. So right now this is in your building code. We're suggesting adding this into zoning. Signage, of course, you do regulate this today. It's actually one of the main sources of variances we've found. So we're working with the city to come up with a kind of a revised set of development standards for how we regulate signs. Just a few pages here showing some of the graphics or diagrams that we have in the draft. So we have a set of sign types and a set of regulations around maximum size for each one and which districts it could be used in. And then finally, last here is lighting. So this is not lighting of the public realm, not like street lamps, but lights that are actually attached to buildings or that are put in parking lots and so forth. Some requirements here in terms of achieving a minimum level of safety and also avoiding things like light pollution. So I'm going to end it there. I know I went through that really fast, but put that out to you guys for questions or comments, or happy to answer anything you have.
Okay, we'll start with questions online. Commissioner Boaz.
Boy, I do not have questions at this time. It was a really great presentation, and I think it was a lot to process, honestly, and really highlighted the importance of this project. I look forward to looking more closely at. I'd like to get a copy of the presentation actually, so I can look more closely at all the issues you raised, and also I very much look forward to seeing the next iteration of the project for you to see how you've incorporated some of the public comment and the issues that were raised. But all in all, great project, and exciting to see it move forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure Miriam can share that presentation. And also the actual draft is going to be posted within the next couple of days. So,
Commissioner Garmendia.
Thank you very much. I'll echo the comments made by Commissioner Boaz. Lots of information. Thank you for presenting it. I want to read it again when it's mailed or emailed to us. Thanks.
Alderwoman Saunier.
I think this was a great presentation. I think my brain naturally starts thinking of, just all the many points you had in there about things that need to be discussed and what public input will be. But for now, I'll hold my questions and I just look forward to future discussion.
I just wanted to quickly add that I believe Chairwoman Boaz and Vice Chair Banton and the whole Zoop team have discussed the idea of more of a work session with commissioners. We're going to get that on the calendar at a time that both works well within the sequence of phases in the project, as well as for commissioners in a format that's effective. Because I know this is, I think we'll need several of those through the process to make sure we're really working in partnership here and that commissioners have the opportunity to wrap their minds around it.
Can I just say that I think when you're looking at setting that up, the Board of Education, we used to do like one meeting formally for kind of all the public business. And then one of our other meetings every month was a working session. So there may be something there for you all to look at when you're trying to, look into setting that up.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you for the presentation. It was interesting as always. I've learned so much about zoning through this update process and really appreciate it. I think it's smart to pull the parking requirements out because I do think that'll end up being a very heated topic in the city of St. Louis. So I'm looking forward to continuing all these conversations. Thanks.
Commissioner Hubman.
Yeah, parking's always a contentious issue. So, lot of ground covered. I appreciate it. Really look forward to seeing the draft document. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
Echoing everyone else's statements, I think you all continue to do a great job. I really appreciate the level of engagement or the intent behind the level of engagement that you're offering. And I also don't have any comments because it's a lot of information. So I need to sit with it for a while.
Commissioner Miller.
Yeah, thank you. Renee, can you describe the scope of the administration process that we're getting ready to go into, what that entails, and just what we should expect coming out of that?
Sure. So I think it gets into the administrative or decision-making parts of the code. So things like how how variances are granted, some of the specific rules around how the Board of Adjustment operates, what constitutes a variance. I think as we're going to get into, potentially rules for notification around certain things, how nonconformities are dealt with. So, things that nonconformities and also, previous variances that were granted. There's a lot of kind of, nuts and bolts in there. How the code gets amended. Some of this will be no surprises, will be, a system similar to what you have today. Some of this, there's the potential for some tuning it up.
Just going to quickly add another topic we've started talking about is administrative options for the conditional use process and having maybe sort of right-sized versions of that so that less complicated conditional uses can be reviewed through a more seamless process, and larger, more significant conditional uses can have a more deliberate, extended process.
Okay, so the process you went through before on your presentation, you outlined several places where we don't address certain issues, planting and so forth. Will you do something similar to that on the administrative side? So,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I think we'll definitely need to kind of line these up with the way, particularly for this one, where it's a little bit wonkier for the general public to kind of understand all those processes, but we'll need to really describe them and talk about specifically what we're proposing changing.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, Renee, for the presentation, and thanks PDA staff for your work on this. No questions at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Fowler.
Thank you, Renee, for your presentation. I like that some of the comments were kind of all across the board. I hated this or I love this because it means that people are engaged. I'm really excited to see the new zoning code close some gaps. There's things like promoting pedestrian priority and setting rules for how to get pedestrians to the right of way, which in the city we're pretty fortunate, but we have some neighbors that, kind of overlook that. So I'm excited to see that be set in black and white in a code and close some of the other gaps, lighting, screening, all that stuff. One question I do have for you is how do you plan to engage or get more comments for the areas that weren't hit as well or didn't have as many comments? Mark Twain, Kings Oak. There was another one, but how do you, I know it's hard, right? Like, how do you get people to give comments? Maybe you get it right. Maybe it's perfect, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have our engagement team on the call today, or at least I don't think I do. But yeah, I would say that it's going to be about where we hold meetings in the future. We may look at holding meetings closer to those communities. It may also be about the outreach that we do in terms of going to neighborhood groups in those areas or like events. We have the possibility of doing pop-ups or speaking at existing events. Or engaging neighborhood groups in those areas with the project. May also be doing things like signs and handouts and so forth in some of those areas as well. So I don't know if I can say more about that right now, but that's certainly on our minds.
That's good. I just think some areas might think disenfranchised, just not engaged. So I think going that extra step in those areas may help and get buy-in and just also give them a voice. So appreciate it. That's all I have.
Another quick thing we've talked about, including internally, similar to the BRT process actually, is how do we, number one, fully absorb all of the land use recommendations coming out of adopted neighborhood plans and maybe kind of revisit with some of the same groups that were part of those processes. And for the neighborhood planning processes that are currently underway, is there a way to kind of work through those processes or in tandem so we're not asking people to give more and more and more of their time on similar topics?
One last thing about that, Miriam, we just did the Mark Twain plan, so we do have people
Yes.
that are identified in the neighborhood that have participated in, that would likely be willing to participate again for a specific purpose like this.
Yeah, I think that's right. And Baden and North Point too, and Plan Area 1, a great base of both some more detailed guidance from those neighborhood plans than is available via this loop. And yeah, a great group to
So maybe
reconnect
we could
with.
share our, contacts from Jonathan's group.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the great presentation. Thanks for all your great work on this. Look forward to seeing it progress and be completed. Don, did you have anything you wanted to add? Where Don is. Okay. All right. That concludes our informational items for tonight. We will move to our action item, which is a zoning text amendment, PDA 003-26 ZTX. This is a review of the zoning regulations for data centers as amended by the Board of Aldermen, and there is no public hearing. The presentation by staff will be from Miriam and Alizia.
Many papers sorted here. So as Commissioner Bradley described, the purpose of this item is to review the amendments made through the legislative process at the Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee. So that committee has been hard at work discussing, reviewing the data center regulations. A lot of additional community and technical feedback received. And the purpose of this session is to walk through all of the changes that were made through that process one by one for the commission's discussion and either affirmation or denial, or maybe there's also a potential to affirm and provide some additional kind of potential revisions for the Board of Aldermen to consider. But I'll just say, well, before I say that, this is where we are in the process. And I know many members of the public in the room have probably been with us through much of this process. And I do want to thank members of the public who are clearly very committed to making sure we put the city in a good spot on this issue. It is a very complex issue that many, many people are concerned about. So thank you to the public. There has been an extensive process at the Planning Commission, 3 meetings, 2 with very extensive public testimony and written comment prior to the meeting in June, where the commission advanced a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen. And then that kicked off the legislative process. Alderwoman Schweitzer is the sponsor of what is now Board Bill 49, and Alderwoman Saunier, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and I believe now Alderman Browning have all joined as co-sponsors of this legislation. And they have been very active in the process of these refinements. The HUD's process, I know the report says 4 hearings. It was actually 3 hearings, many other conversations. Yeah, maybe it felt like 4. No, it was 3. Additional public testimony and written testimony, which has been shared with commissioners, and lots of committee discussion and amendments. So Pink Star is where we are tonight, reviewing those amendments to provide sort of an updated recommendation to the Board of Aldermen before the board proceeds with second reading of the bill as amended, perfection, and then hopefully third reading and final passage. And I believe it remains many participants and the sponsors' goal to allow for passage of this before the board enters summer recess. So here are the 10 changes made, and I'll walk through one by one, pretty high level, but we do have the detailed text available on a separate document that I can pull up as needed. The purple notes further refinements made at yesterday's HUD's meeting, in addition to those made as of the engrossment of amendments last Friday. So the purple reflects what was provided as updates in the report circulated to the commission yesterday evening. And here are some of the reasons for the changes. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the staff process. I think, big reason number one, lots of additional public feedback during the hearings and in writing. Number two, received some technical input from Ameren, which the commission didn't have the benefit of at the time the initial recommendation was made. And that include collective conversation with Ameren, Renew Missouri, as well as Missouri Coalition for the Environment. Again, many thanks to MCE and Renew Missouri for really being, I think, great and responsive partners to the city throughout this process. And then also extensive technical and legal feedback from and conversation with existing data center operators. I'm sure commissioners remember sort of the detailed discussion we had last time about existing non-conforming uses. That discussion continued, and I think some important changes were made. So the team process here were that some combination of the bill sponsor, co-sponsors, planning and sustainability staff, mayor's office, president's office, city councilor's office, and technical experts like Renew Missouri and MCE were part of this amendment process. So I do just want to say I think it's been a really good team effort figuring all of this very complicated work out. I want to talk a little bit more about the public feedback provided. I know that was provided to commissioners, but commissioners may not have had time to review it in detail. There was a lot of it. So some key points here. Number one, for many residents, a desire for a consent mechanism and or a ban on major facilities. So that was expressed continuously. Number two, from some residents, a desire for more time in the process of developing these regulations. From several others, a desire for regulations to be established kind of ASAP, as soon as possible and before summer recess. From several residents, support for the regulations, even those providing feedback about potential improvements or additions. Many did express sort of feeling that these are a good place for the city to kind of get some protections in place. From labor and development representatives, a clear concern expressed that the regulations may be fairly restrictive, especially for large facilities. From some representatives, labor and others, a desire for workforce requirements. There's also been some discussion about how maybe the zoning regulations themselves are not kind of the place for that. We'll be able to discuss that more as a commission as needed. And finally, some residents and subject matter experts suggested a number of refinements to ensure that there was a little bit more objectivity in application materials provided to the city. So you'll see several amendments touch on that point. So I will quickly summarize each of these, and when we get to the renewable energy requirements, tag in Director Russell to describe a little bit more about that. So the first set of changes were informed directly by conversation with subject matter experts at Ameren. These changes simply updated some of the definitions that then those renewable energy requirements reference. This is because from a sort of administration and compliance point of view, all renewable energy is reported as a renewable energy credit, whether that's coming from some program with the local electric service provider, in our case Ameren, or from outside of the utility territory. So you'll see instead of the concept of, well, there's renewable energy and then there's RECs, all renewable energy is now referred to as a different kind of REC. And there's also a little bit more clarity on bundled versus unbundled. Those were added as definitions and integrated into the requirements, and that local renewable energy credit definition is no longer in use, and so that's been removed. Number two, there was a kind of slight refinement to the definition of maximum power demand. So it turns out through conversation with Ameren that contract concept that they had referenced in some of their feedback to the commission actually doesn't apply below 50 megawatts. And so instead, the single point of interconnection concept better achieves the sort of policy intent that the maximum power demand reported in an application and potentially triggering additional requirements reflects the full load that can be delivered to a site. So this change updates that term to better be of more use to the full spectrum of data center sizes that the city might see applications for. Number three, strengthen and clarified some of the fuel storage provisions and application requirements. And this came from a little bit better understanding of the specific fuel storage concerns of downtown neighborhoods of a data center currently under construction. And these conversations led to, I think, more clarity about the importance, number one, of upfront information provided in the application about refueling protocols and plans, and also heightened enclosure standards. So now, later in a minute, you'll see, or in the detailed report, you'll see a masonry enclosure standard and also a concrete pad requirement, including spill containment. So both sort of environmental safety and safety in the event of stray bullet or something like that, with what can be large diesel tanks that extend the sort of backup operation time for backup generators. We also discussed with existing operators to understand sort of the technical importance and usefulness of on-site fuel storage, sort of the difference between standalone fuel storage and fuel storage in the belly tank of a backup generator. So some good technical understanding there that all inform those updated fuel storage standards. Number four, this is another one that came from further conversation with Ameren, clarifying that certain types of agreements referenced in the application requirements may not be, well, probably will not be provided for projects below 50 megawatts. So instead, we added actually back in that will serve letter concept as another form of documentation. But still, the kind of intent of all of this information being required in an application is to make sure that that the utility can adequately serve the site, so that that's one of the kind of many ways that the application requirements seek to check that there won't be reliance on backup generators as a primary power source, because that is what's been part of backup generators and also just primary generators, real nightmare scenarios in terms of air quality in other communities. So this is part of strengthening one of the checks against that negative potential. Number five, simply requiring that the environmental impact report is prepared by a credentialed professional environmental engineer with input by the City of St. Louis about who that preparer is. Before, there was just a more general reference to professional environmental engineer. Now you see credentialed professional environmental engineer. Number six, a little bit of clarification about permitted backup generator enclosures. So, and this is really clarification of the language that expressed what was otherwise the intent, honestly, here. So any backup generator, if it's not enclosed in a primary structure or building, is going to come in basically like a big metal box provided by the manufacturer that integrates sound attenuation and ventilation. So this just clarifies that that does count as an enclosure for a backup generator. The section in bold is what was added. For the renewable energy requirements, I'll ask Alicia to describe.
Thank you. Good evening. So we had a lot of discussion with Ameren and our experts at Renew Missouri and MCE. So it was all very, very helpful. And where we landed essentially is this is only for the standard and major data centers. Before an occupancy permit is permitted and they have that plan for how they're going to meet the renewable energy requirements, there are certain thresholds that they would have to achieve. So before an occupancy permit, we're expecting 25% of their energy coming from renewables and no more. It can be a mix of bundled or unbundled renewable energy credits. So that's why we added those definitions for bundled and unbundled in the regulations. And those recs are allowed from, Ameren's territory, from Missouri, or the MISO region. So we're still keeping them to our area, which is really important, and they're not coming from like California or Texas. And then in year 5, that threshold bumps up to 50% renewable energy requirement with no more than 25% allowed through unbundled recs. And then at year 10, 100% renewable energy with no more than 25% unbundled recs. And so here kind of shows like that change. It's not a very big change, but it does allow for a little more flexibility and time for Ameren to bring on, expand their programs and access those renewable energy credits throughout the territory.
Number 8 was the requirement of a supermajority of the Board of Aldermen in improving the public impact agreement rather than a simple majority. This amendment was introduced by Alderman Aldridge, and this, I believe, was in response to the desire for a kind of more accountable process and a kind of step toward the idea of resident consent, though not stepping into a signature requirement, which I think the city should consider moving away from generally for uses within its zoning code. Number 9, the updated applicability section. So this is probably the most technical set of updates. Not that the others were not technical, I know, but this was the most technical process, and we can get into the very specific language, but it's going to provide the sort of high-level picture of the intent, approach, and then the structure of how this section is now written. So the conversation, as the team got more feedback from existing data center operators, was to balance 3 things. So number 1, the continued viability of existing data centers, because they've made, important investments in their facilities and are serving many local businesses and providing their data needs. And it turns out that kind of many minor structural alterations are just part of the process of upgrading equipment. And as we've discussed, equipment upgrades are really frequent. So number 1, continued viability of existing data centers. Number 2, trying to really address the very legitimate land use concerns of neighboring property owners. And so this discussion was in dialogue both with some of those neighboring property owners and neighborhood organizations representing them who are expressing concerns about a currently under construction data center, but also the operator of that data center who all parties report is coming to the table in really good faith to try to address those concerns. And then number 3, of course, kind of key legal principles for how non-conforming uses and structures can be treated in general, but also in the context of the more general regulations of our code. So those were kind of the 3 principles we were all trying to balance. And so this applicability section now, typo, section, not session, does 3 things. So number 1, ensures that lawful non-conforming structures and kind of use status will not be forfeited solely from a change in tenants. This was never the intent here of this applicability section, because a full facility has been permitted to operate as it is now lawfully operating, more fully occupying that space, or maybe there's a tenant or a licensee that comes or goes. Non-conforming status, I think it's always been intended would extend to those tenants. Now it's just more explicit. Number two, the applicability section requires partial compliance for structural alterations. So like I mentioned, these are very frequently required to modernize equipment or prepare unleased space for new tenants. So unleased space that has been permitted lawfully, there might be somebody coming in to use that. And there might be required a stronger beam or something in a floor to make that possible. Full compliance for a structural alteration simply would not be possible in many, many cases because of some of the location requirements specifically in the zoning code. So there's a facility, for example, across the street from a park. It is across the street from a park. And that is an example of something that just they couldn't do full compliance. And we want to, as much as possible, have standards that they can reasonably meet so that these can remain decisions that don't have to be appealed to the Board of Adjustment as a matter of practice, at least not build in that expectation to the policy, right? And then number three, this section now provides a level of flexibility for exterior structures or improvements that would enclose or screen new equipment. And this is to provide better options than sort of like an open, sprawling equipment yard. So allow for new structures to screen things like backup generators that otherwise would just be placed in a parking lot. So that's kind of a third specific thing that the section now does. And here's the structure of the new section. It's divided into 4 categories: new facilities, expansions of those new facilities, meaning expansions of data centers approved under this new ordinance once it's in place. Number 3, expansions of existing non-conforming structures. So, an existing data center downtown, if it expands through a physical enlargement, or structural alteration. And then number 4, non-conforming uses and structures and previously approved facilities, addressing that too specifically. So new facilities, full compliance, and clarifying that a new tenant of an existing facility does not constitute a new facility. So no changes there, really just a clarification. Number 2, expansions of those new facilities, full compliance. And expansion could include enlargement, structural alteration, or an increase in data center classification. So for new facilities approved under this ordinance that move from a micro or standard to major, those changes in classification for those new and expanding facilities, there can be, and there is proposed here, full compliance expected. So full compliance with the standards of that new classification. Then for expansions of existing non-conforming structures, full compliance for physical expansion or enlargement. So no change there. But for structural alterations which don't involve enlargement, partial compliance. So basically addressing all of the things that they can reasonably do with a real strong emphasis on quality of life concerns for neighboring properties and neighboring groups, but excluding things that are not feasible for a variety of reasons, either the location or kind of something like a power usage effectiveness target that wouldn't be possible to meet without a whole systems building redesign. That is a type of thing that's not feasible. renewable energy standards, because a lot of these facilities operate with long-term leases that are already in place that don't include those terms. The standards or benchmarks that Alicia described, those are not possible, but reporting is possible. So the city would have some knowledge of these facilities' kind of goals and progress toward those goals. And then finally, for non-conforming uses and structures previously approved, basically no changes here, some very technical clarifications, but basically these things kind of treating data centers same as any use that is lawfully operating, but non-conforming or previously approved under previous regulations. Okay. Obviously, happy to answer questions. And then finally, an additional requirement that the baseline noise levels required in the upfront application would be measured by a third-party noise professional provided by the city. So this is one of those things intended to kind of increase the objectivity in the preparation of materials that the city is using to make conditional use determinations. So that is all 10, and really the close of our presentation. You'll see in the staff report that I think it's our view that none of these substantially kind of change the regulations in terms of their relation to compliance with the comprehensive plan. Alicia and I especially were kind of deeply involved from a technical standpoint in these conversations, as of course was the bill sponsor, in many cases co-sponsor Alderwoman Saunier. And I imagine some kind of questions might be collectively answered. But yeah, I think it is our recommendation that the Planning Commission affirms these amendments because we find them to be in conformity with the city's comprehensive plan. But if there are clarifications that the Planning Commission wants to suggest be explored, that can be included in this review as well.
Okay, we'll start with commissioner questions online. Commissioner Boaz.
I do not have any questions right now. This is yet another great presentation. I should have said that about Scott's when after he presented. I think this is one of the most difficult issues we've faced, and with all the changes in the industry, the technology, and both the opportunity for the city and the negative effect, the potential for negative effects. I feel like if we've missed something, it's not through a lack of effort and attention. And I just want to thank, staff, the mayor's office, the Board of Aldermen, partners, everyone for providing the input to get us to, I think, a strong start. I suspect there will be something we need to change down the road, but I think it is important that we get this in place quickly. And I think we're at a good place. Thanks for the opportunity for the comments.
Commissioner Garmendia.
No questions, just a comment. Just want to say thank you to the sponsor, Alderwoman Schweitzer, and everyone who participated in presentations at the hearings at HUD's. You really added a lot to the discussion, the understanding, and I think these amendments get us closer to providing a strong standard. And I just really want to thank all the efforts of the planning staff as well for quickly summarizing all of these amendments for the Planning Commission. Because this was a lot of hours of many people to refine the legislation. So thank you.
Alderwoman Saunier.
I don't have any commentary that no one can see by watching the 3-4 hour HUD's meetings we had, of 4 of them. So I will save my commentary. I will just say, I'm not sure if I would have been told before being a delegate to Planning Commission, we are going to take data centers, that I would have so eagerly said, absolutely, Chairwoman. But I think it worked out how it was supposed to. And I really want to give a gratitude to the staff, number one, for sticking through this process. I know this has taken a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I know we are beyond the original in some ways beyond maybe the original window that we hoped. I definitely want to make sure that I thank Alderwoman Schweitzer. I've had the opportunity to be in so many rooms with her, and she has, to me, just done an incredible job at being a champion for the issue, and to me, centering the most important asset that our city has, which is the people. And I really want to thank the members of the public, because you all have come to hours and hours of Planning Commission meetings and then followed us along with hours and hours of meetings at at the HUD's committee. And so, I know this is basically, for some of you, been your new part-time job. And I'm really grateful that you guys took on, this work. And I mean that for everyone who participated in the process, whether we've been completely aligned on all points or not from the beginning. I just appreciate everyone for sticking in there and helping us to get to this point. And, I hope that residents who are watching this process can see that the best possible effort is being made to, meet this moment where it is, and to balance the many interests while not negating the most important thing and the primary concerns of the Planning Commission, which is, land use, and making sure that it doesn't negatively impact the public welfare, but also doesn't inhibit economic, growth. So I just would give a round of applause to everyone and express my gratitude. And I'm so looking forward to us hopefully doing this today. And I cannot wait to hopefully have a moment where we get back to like speed humps and stop signs legislation at the Board of Aldermen. Thank you.
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Hoping for speed hump and stop sign legislation is not something I ever thought I'd hear from Alderman Sanye. But I just echo all the thanks to the staff and the public and co-sponsors and members of the Planning Commission and members of the nonprofit community, developers, the data center operators. I mean, Ameren, the number of people who participated in shaping these regulations, and it's just in the labor community, it's been incredible to see how many people have participated and given feedback. And I think we're in a really good spot for what I think is important, which is to have really strong and thoughtful regulations that adhere to our comprehensive plan, which of course includes our sustainability plan. And that's something that's really important to me, both personally and professionally. So I'm happy to participate in any questions people have as well. At the Board of Aldermen, I think we are in a pretty good spot with getting support and getting it across the finish line. There are 2 upcoming meetings, 2 added meetings to our schedule in order to get through this as quickly as possible. And those would be July 20th and July 24th. So hoping that can happen and that we end up getting the support. I can tell you that the support of the Planning Commission, the support of the planning staff means a lot to aldermen. So I hope that you all are really upfront and thoughtful about where you think it is today, because that'll help with talking to colleagues as well and knowing where you all stand. So thank you for your time and everything that you're doing.
Commissioner Hubman.
Continue to gush a little bit. Just want to congratulate you and your staff and the city in general. The level of investigation, technical rigor, collaboration across various sectors of City Hall, the community. It's been really sustained and impressive, and it really stands out, especially in the context of, this issue has been very volatile in some of our communities within our region. And I think the process that you went through really helped keep this on target, productive, respectful all the way through. And that's no small feat. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. That said, I do have 2 questions. One's very, very detailed. The sound attenuation on the backup generators, is that pegged to a performance threshold, a decibel level at certain distance or something, or is it just sound attenuation within the
Yeah, in the standard manufacturer provided enclosures, I'm actually not certain, but those noise standards otherwise set would apply no matter the case, even in the case of new equipment
Okay.
or kind of triggered by structural
Sound attenuation
alteration.
can mean a lot of different things.
I think it on its own, it may not be sufficient either in one of those standard boxes or in a primary structure, but the expectation is set by those performance requirements that apply.
And my only other question, can you remind me, is there a built-in sort of review revision timeline? The technology,
Yeah,
the
there
economics,
is.
the market for this whole sector are rapidly evolving. And I think
Yes, there
important
is.
to review or revisit this.
It says the Planning Commission of the City of St. Louis, so that's all of us, shall take up review of this chapter no later than 2 years from the effective date in order to determine necessary changes that respond to evolutions in technology or increased understanding of impacts and opportunities. And this section also flags an assessment of renewable energy supply and compliance pathways, as well as an assessment of megawattage thresholds between data center classifications as key points of investigation for that review. Does say this requirement for review is directory and not mandatory. I think we will have to build these regulations in somehow to the new code. So I think that presents one opportunity. Whether we do that as a very comprehensive review at that time, I think, I'm not sure yet. I think we'll see how the process goes, but there is a 2-year review directive in the ordinance.
Great. Good work.
Commissioner Williams.
I have no further comments, and I think everyone already gave you all the compliments, so I would just be repeating them. I know I have gone between exhaustion and excitement about this topic, so I'm glad to see such a thorough document developed. I'm looking forward to voting. That's all.
Commissioner Miller.
Yeah, Miriam, I wanted to hear a little bit more about the developers and the comments they had and the people with the existing data centers. You talked a lot about that, but are those two entities, and I know they're different, can you take them one at a time and talk about their reaction to the board bill now as it stands?
Yeah, I think, well, number one, staff did seek the input of the development community along the way, primarily with GSL as the sort of aggregator of sentiment from the development community. And there were many changes made along the way to respond to feedback we received, whether it's about process predictability, providing more rationale for the setbacks that are included, a whole number of things. I'm kind of failing to think of them all at the moment. I think some of the refinements to the renewable energy standards, particularly the year 0 or before occupancy permit standard, was an important change that recognized the feasibility constraints of what's available in Ameren's current supply of renewables. So I think we did make efforts at engagement and did really try to incorporate changes where we could without, I think, sacrificing some of the real principles and solutions to concerns we are hearing from the public. We really, of course, in this exercise, tried to thread a needle. I am certain we're in a place where very few people are happy. And I'm sure members of the community here wish there were many more restrictions than are currently in this. So So that's a long way of saying to the developers, we really did try to listen, but I understand some of the frustration that may remain. But I think fully incorporating some of the changes would have put us in a tough spot in addressing the community concerns. Existing data center operators, that those discussions really focused on their non-conforming status. We didn't have extensive separate conversations about their desires or plans for expansion in the community, though, for new facilities in the community, though, that could be something under consideration. We didn't get a lot of, not that I recall, very specific feedback from them about how these standards would or wouldn't complicate those plans. But we really did try to reach not agreement, but some real common ground from a policy point of view about making sure that that applicability section and partial compliance did not undermine or threaten the important investments that they've already made in their facilities, but again, still addressing some of the quality of life concerns of surrounding neighbors.
Is it okay to? I just wanted to add too that many of the existing data center operators did come to the HUD's committee and ended up, if you watched the first hearing, they kind of got up and gave their concerns about the legislation. And then I think by the second or third hearing, many of them showed up in support of the legislation. So I just wanted to make sure that was on record, that many of them actually came and said on record that they were in support, and thanked Alderwoman Schweitzer and many of the engaged stakeholders, the president's office, and all of us for, having those conversations. And we did, I would say, had a few meetings with them to kind of really nail down what their concerns were. And I would echo what Ms. Keller said, that although I wouldn't say 100% agreement was given, I do think we built consensus, and many of them voiced that they are comfortable with where we've landed.
Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, no questions. But obviously I want to give a special thank you to PDA staff, Miriam Keller and Elijah Russell specifically, and all the others in support. I know this was a long journey in a relatively short amount of time, and have a lot of respect for the work that you guys have put forward. And also want to thank Alderwoman Schweitzer and Sonia for, taking this consequential issue head on behalf of your constituents, and, finding a way to get to a resolution for everyone. So great job.
Commissioner Fowler.
Thanks, team. It's almost done. We're done. I have one question though. It's number 4. My memory's not the best, but I remember we had a Ameren representative come and talk to us, and the will serve letters came up. And I mean, I could be misremembering this.
No, you're not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. That, they have to serve. So what's the meaning of a will serve letter?
It was like, we don't provide those because legally, I forget, one way or another, they're required to provide electricity. So I'm surprised to see that this will serve letter is magically back. I'm just clarification.
This suggestion did come directly from, I believe it was an economic development person at Ameren who clarified some of the back and forth that they have with those sub-megawatt or sub-50 megawatt customers, and it did indicate that this is something provided to them and would be helpful in achieving the intent. I know a number of other folks were part of that conversation. Anything you'd add or correct?
That sounds
okay. Yeah, maybe something was lost in translation early in the process, but this was a suggestion directly from Ameren.
All right. I mean, that was my only thing that stood out to me. Great.
So I don't have any formal questions. I would agree with the comment that this is certainly, in my 17 plus years on the Planning Commission, one of the most, if not the most complicated and difficult items we have ever taken up. And it's taken a long time with a lot of input. I feel like the collaboration has been just outstanding between all parties, and compromises have been made, and the public was listened to. Thank you to the alders for all their work on this. Thank you to the PDA staff. I think we've all expressed our gratitude, but it's been a lot of work and it's been a long time. And I don't think anybody should think that this was rushed or sold short, because I know for a fact it wasn't. So I feel very, very good about where we are. And I think with that, I'm finished asking or making comments. Don, do you have anything you want to add?
I'll do some comments at the director's.
Okay. And I think you made your recommendation from the staff already. So our next step would be to walk through each amendment, item by item, all 10 of them. And we will take a motion, a second, and we'll vote on them item by item. And if there's any issues, we'll address them then. So the first item is updated definitions related to renewable energy. First change. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, is there a reason that we have to do on all individually?
So it's recommended that way.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose what we could do is we could make a motion to accept all 10 of them. And if there's a problem, then we can parse it up.
Okay.
And I would make one small modification to our recommendation. Also, I thought of some other points along our journey in terms of conversation with the development community. We did specifically reach out to a couple of trade organizations representing the development community. I'm not going to mention who, to kind of request, as part of the planning commission's work, any specific feedback they would provide. At that stage, it was never provided to us by those groups. I think we were very interested in technical refinements that can make this a little bit easier, but I just, if there's I sense that there's a suggestion that there was not outreach to the development community, at least from PDA staff work. I don't think that's the case. I'm not suggesting you're suggesting that. I'm suggesting those suggestions have been made elsewhere, and I don't think that that's an accurate characterization of the process. So that's not directed at you, Commissioner. I apologize.
I'll ask legal counsel. David, do you have any issue with one motion versus 10?
It's a matter of if all of the members are comfortable voting the same way on all of them, if there was going to be a reason why someone would want to vote no on a particular amendment, then you'll need to break them out. So I think it's more of a question of if anybody objects.
And then the one little additional bit of language might be that in addition to this motion, maybe a sort of an allowance of, if needed, further amendments during perfection that might help clarify the intent and administration of the regulations. I can just imagine any number of little things that come up, or it's like, oh, you know what, the word and instead of or shall it, like, I would, unless those do rise to a substantive level, perhaps those can remain.
And or sometimes can be substantive. And
Well,
sometimes
maybe
not. So,
will instead of shall. How about, yeah, no, that's better.
right.
But clarifications like that, I would think could be helpful and need not come back to the planning commission.
Okay, so we have 10 amendments. I will ask, is there a motion?
I would move that we consider them collectively under one vote.
Second.
So I have a motion to consider them collectively and a second. Can you call a roll, please?
All right. And so this is just to consider them, but not to vote them out?
Right.
Okay. Alderwoman Schweitzer? Alderwoman Saunier?
Aye.
Chair Bradley?
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler?
Aye.
Commissioner Garmendia?
Aye.
Commissioner Hubman?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
And Commissioner Boaz?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. So that leads us to the executive director's report.
No,
Well,
No, we gotta vote one more time.
I think now you want to move to actually approve.
Excuse me, I wish I was there. Okay. So we passed a motion to accept them collectively,
Consider them.
To consider.
consider them collectively. So now we need a motion to
Adopt them.
accept them collectively.
There you go.
Correct. Thank you. All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
Can we do previous role?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to accept them collectively.
Sorry,
Can you call the roll, please?
Who seconded?
Williams.
Aaron? Okay.
Williams.
Previous role.
If there's
Sorry?
a second, if there's a previous roll in a second, you can do that, or you can do a roll call.
Oh,
Your call.
it's been requested for previous role. Is there any objection to use the previous role? Seeing none, the item is approved. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Now we have the executive director's reporting.
With that,
Thank you.
I'd like to conclude tonight with
I
executive.
get the hard parts on the hard.
So if we could do other.
We did it.
Delegated items before my report. What is the?
I was not. I started eating dinner before I came to this.
Anything to say about it?
I didn't even have to go through half the battle you guys.
With that, let's conclude with the executive director's report. And I've done a little math. And the math shook me up a little bit. And probably as I talk about what I'm going to talk about, my math, Miriam may give me a stare down. With a smile, I hope, but 20 years ago, 27 years ago this month, it was during the Mayor Harmon administration. Mike Jones was his chief person on development planning issues. Said to me, Don, we've had planning be fragmented within us. I was actually an employee of SODC at the time. There were different parts of planning all over. Let's create a comprehensive planning and urban design agency. And we did that. And it was begun 27 years ago this month, where we became the Planning and Urban Design Agency with cultural resources, with the various things that we do, and a cabinet level position that I've held. What is making me partly tear up, other than the math, because it implies also how old I am, but is that the very purpose of all of that was we need to be able to have the professionalism, the resources, the networks and contact talent and education to have within that agency to do what you guys have very much seen in the last many months of some difficult issues that our professional staff has worked on. And that's really pretty terrific because, as we know, our momentum is we're done great. We're going to do better, and we can't include a lot of items. A second part, and it's the part is soon after in like 2005, there was something created called the Big City Planning Directors. And it was an invitation only thing for from about 30 American cities to go to Cambridge. And we were there for 3 days with my professional organization, the American Planning Association, being a sponsor, and the Lincoln Institute for Land Policy, which has done a lot of things, and the Harvard Graduate School of Design. And I've been back, other than a couple years because of COVID and a lot of the difference, to that session every year for now over 20 years. And it's a fascinating experience to learn and have the colleagues that I have from that and what we dive into. A second thing is that we also, as professionals from around the country, go and spend part of a day with the graduate students at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, second-year students, meaning they're looking for planning jobs. But we spend time with them. We talk to their classes, hear their classes, and have a little cocktail hour. A few years ago, when I knew Miriam from being here at WashU and in the Office of Sustainability, she applied to go to Harvard. And I wrote a letter of recommendation for her, which was pretty damn easy to write. When I got there that fall, so, new students go in September. We go in October. When I walked into the Harvard Graduate School of Design, the Dean of Planning said to me, "Don, thanks for sending us Miriam. And we're so lucky to have her." Thank you, Miriam, for and the team that you inspire and the team that we all hear from inspire all of us to do good. And with that, that's why I wanted to say it all at the end of the meeting. So thank you.
That's so sweet. So sweet.
But Don, it's not 10 o'clock yet.
11 o'clock, actually. Our last meeting was 11, I think 11:20 something.
Okay. Well, Boston and Cambridge is on East Coast time, so it's 11. Almost. All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Don. We have one delegated item, PDA 00826. It's a partial vacation of Alabama Avenue. There's no action on that. So if there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, Bruce roll.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Thanks, everyone.
Forgot their own.
Thanks for the photograph.